Good morning everyone, this is Dolphin Project. We're live from the cove in Taiji as a pod of bottlenose dolphins awaits their fate this morning. We can hear the skiffs just coming around the corner now. There are a lot of people on these skiffs, lots of trainers ready to inspect these dolphins in the captive selection process. This pod was driven in at some point yesterday afternoon. Whilst cove monitors were out of Taiji, we did a drive-through later in the day and saw that there was a pod netted in the cove. You may have seen our live stream yesterday afternoon. But they were netted in, lights were put up at the cove, and security guards were here to make sure nothing happened to the dolphins, make sure we don't intervene. For this pod to stay overnight and for them to undergo the captive selection process this morning. We stayed here last night until the sun set and it got dark, and then we arrived this morning before the sun rose. So the first skiff is just coming into the cove right now. You can see there are lots of people on the boat, so lots of trainers. We saw trainers from Taiji Whale Museum getting ready to come to the cove this morning. They were standing outside in their wetsuits. But thank you so much for joining us. We're currently live as a pod of bottlenose dolphins has been netted into the cove and kept overnight. It's now the following morning. It's almost 6:30 a.m. And the lives of these dolphins will change forever today. So 2 more skiffs are arriving with more people on. This morning when we first arrived at the cove, we could hear the dolphins vocalizing and communicating with each other. They sounded desperate. They've just been trapped in the cove overnight for well over 12 hours. This is a completely alien environment for them, completely different to their home in the ocean. So if you're just joining us, this is Dolphin Project. We're currently live on Facebook and Twitter as a pod of bottlenose dolphins awaits their fate this morning. They were driven into the cove at some point yesterday afternoon and left overnight with no food and no water, ready to face the captive selection process this morning. So after reviewing our footage yesterday, there are definitely at least 2 juveniles within this pod. They do appear to be quite small juveniles, so we'll keep a close eye on what happens to them. And we think there is a total of 11 dolphins in this pod. So all the skiffs have just dropped off the trainers on the beach, where they'll inspect the dolphins. So bottlenose dolphins are the most lucrative in the captivity industry. A live trained bottlenose can bring in up to 6 figures in dollars. So they're highly profitable. And this is what motivates the hunters to continue hunting. They claim it's their tradition and culture, but the captivity industry only boomed in the 1960s. So this has absolutely nothing to do with tradition. As well as the fact that they completely conceal what they're doing. They do the whole process under tarps, so in an effort to not show the world what is happening here. But if they were proud of this tradition, then they wouldn't be ashamed of it. So they're pulling across the tarps on the beach. These dolphins will be absolutely exhausted. They've been trapped in the cove all night, and they haven't had access to food, which means they also haven't had access to water. Dolphins hydrate through their food, through the fish that they eat. But because they haven't had access to that fish, they haven't had access to water either. So the dolphins have swum out closer to the outer net. I'll try and angle it so you can see. Just behind those branches there. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. This is Dolphin Project. We're live as a pod of bottlenose dolphins is in the cove. They were netted in sometime yesterday afternoon and kept overnight. And the hunters and trainers have arrived this morning to inspect them for captive selection. So it's very unusual for the hunters to go out in the afternoon to hunt for dolphins. So it's very possible that they received a tip-off from a fisherman that there were bottlenose dolphins swimming in the area. So they're starting to push the dolphins into shallower water using the engines of the skiffs. See the pod swimming very close together. They'll be absolutely terrified. So I've just got word from another cove monitor who said that 5 banger boats have left the harbour in search of more dolphins. So we'll keep an eye on their activity, and hopefully they come back empty-handed. These dolphins managed to swim behind the skiffs. They've just appeared behind them, but it looks like they're preparing to rev their skiffs again to push them closer. Just yesterday, this family of dolphins were swimming wild and free, but now they're just being harassed, all in the name of profit. I'm sure you can hear the loud revving of the engines. If we can hear it that loudly from up here, it must be absolute hell for the dolphins. So the hunters are pulling across another net now. The dolphins are swimming around quite frantically. If you're just joining us, this is Dolphin Project. We're live from the cove as a pod of bottlenose dolphins will undergo the captive selection process. It's about 6:40 in the morning, and these dolphins were kept overnight after they were driven in yesterday afternoon. Please share this live stream. We're currently live on Facebook and Twitter. It's really important that we get the word out of how dolphins end up in tanks. It's an extremely cruel practice. But a lot of the world don't know that this happens. We need to stop the demand for captive dolphins in order to stop the supply and to put an end to these hunts. So again, the hunters are revving their engines, pushing the dolphins further towards the beach. Facilities in the area lost bottlenose dolphins throughout the typhoon earlier this year, just a few months ago. The dolphins are tail slapping a lot and are swimming very close to each other. Dolphins are extremely emotional and social beings, and they won't leave their families. The Coast Guard has just arrived, which means they can start the process. So it won't be long before these dolphins are harassed and inspected to see if they're suitable for the captivity industry. So the chirping you can hear is just the birds in the trees. It's not the dolphins making those noises. You can see the amount of white water, and you can hear how loudly they're revving their engines in order to further intimidate the dolphins. They've just pulled across the next net, which means they're even closer to the beach where they'll be manhandled and inspected. You can hear the dolphins exhaling really loudly. There are now divers in the water as well, who will then begin to launch themselves at the dolphins. Let me just get a better angle for you. We are quite limited with the view we have here, with all the plants. I do apologise. We'll try and get the best view for you possible. So divers are starting to grab hold of the dolphins. So this skiff has got a bottlenose dolphin pinned to the side of it, held with a net, and they're dragging it under the tarps now to be inspected. The more pretty dolphins without any scarring or injuries are most likely to be selected for captivity. Also, if they're younger, I think this skiff is just preparing to you can see the black nets there passing to one another. These are what they use to keep hold of the dolphins. This is extremely distressing for these dolphins. They would have never experienced being manhandled like this before. Again, I do apologise for the lack of view. The plants are very overgrown here, and so it really restricts what we can see. You can see divers and some dolphins in the water. If you're just joining us, this is Dolphin Project. We're live from the Cove in Taiji as a pod of bottlenose dolphins are being manhandled and wrestled, undergoing the captive selection process. So there are some dolphins swimming between the next two nets. They haven't netted all of them in the most shallow water. This is absolutely heartbreaking to see. Dolphins aren't here for our entertainment. They should be swimming wild and free in the ocean. They shouldn't have to endure this horrific process. You can hear someone chanting down there. They show absolutely no respect. So the other dolphins are just swimming between these two nets up here. They've obviously separated them into two groups. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. A pod of bottlenose dolphins is currently being harassed and manhandled and inspected for captive selection. This means trainers go through each dolphin and they choose which ones they would like to put on display at their facility. So this family will be completely ripped apart this morning. So they've split the pod into two groups. One section of the pod is between these two nets, and the rest of them are netted towards the beach where they're currently being inspected. Trainers claim to love and care for these dolphins, but if they really did so, then they wouldn't be able to watch what happens here and actually participate. It's obvious how distressing this is for the dolphins. By the way, you can see them frantically swimming around and splashing the surface of the water and trying to get away from the hunters. If they are selected for captivity, their lives will never be the same. They'll be forced to perform for human entertainment. Dolphins will be torn apart from their families today and placed in a confined space of either a pen or a tank and deprived of food in order to make them perform. And the food they'll be fed will be frozen fish. They won't be real dolphins anymore. So far this season, 19 bottlenose dolphins have been captured, and they have a quota for 298. So they still have a long way to go before meeting that quota. But unfortunately, some of these dolphins will count towards that today. So we've just seen another dolphin be strapped up in a net and taken under the tarps to be inspected by the trainers. They'll decide whether the dolphin is suitable for their facility or not. We've seen trainers from various facilities here Taiji Whale Museum, and we'll check back on our footage to see if we can recognise any of the trainers from the other facilities. If you want to find out more ways you can help, please go to dolphinproject.com and hit the Take Action link. And help us be a voice for these dolphins. I mentioned earlier that 5 banger boats, 5 dolphin hunting boats, left the harbour this morning to hunt for more dolphins. So they're bringing up this net now, and I think they'll be pushing the rest of the pod closer to the beach. They're just here by these skiffs. They've just had to watch the rest of their pod be manhandled and wrestled. And now they'll have to undergo the same process. So that siren you can hear is just notification that the fish has come in this morning. It's nothing to worry about. So again, you can hear how loudly they're revving their engines, trying to push the dolphins towards the beach. These dolphins are really stressing out. Divers are pouncing on them. So one of the dolphins has just managed to escape, presumably under the net, as they lifted it up to try and get it out of the nets, and it's just appeared between the two again. The hunters seem quite bewildered. So you can see it just swimming in front of that skiff there. The other dolphins, however, are still trapped in the cove. We really appreciate all of your support. Thank you for sharing this live stream. We're currently live on Facebook and Twitter. I've just seen another dolphin strapped up in a net and pulled onto the tarps. So even if a marine park or aquarium doesn't acquire their dolphins directly from Taiji, they are indirectly supporting this process, as they're still creating a demand for captive dolphins. These hunts are completely legal. The Fisheries Union grant the hunters a quota, and this season they have a quota for 298 bottlenose dolphins. So far this season they've captured 19, but that number will rise today. Divers continue to launch themselves at the dolphins. Wrestling them into slings to be taken to a captive facility. So we won't know how many dolphins they take out of this pod until they leave the cove with the dolphins in slings. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. This is Dolphin Project. We're live as a pod of bottlenose dolphins are undergoing the captive selection process. You can see the divers just launch themselves on top of dolphins. And wrestle them to the skiffs, which then drag them under the tarps to be inspected. This was quite a small pod of dolphins, and there were a couple of juveniles in this pod. We really appreciate all of your support. Thank you so much for sharing this live stream and for supporting Dolphin Project. Please head to dolphinproject.com and hit the Take Action link to find out more ways you can get involved and be a voice for these dolphins. If you can hear that banging, that's actually the sound of a dolphin thrashing against the side of a skiff in stress. This is an extremely stressful process for them. Dolphins don't deserve this. They deserve to be swimming wild and free in the ocean. They can swim up to 100 kilometers a day in the wild, but when they're in captivity, they can only swim in circles. We've got to remember that when humans visit captive facilities for a day of fun and entertainment, they get to go home at the end of the day. These dolphins don't get to go home. Their life continues for them in captivity. They are completely confined with no escape for the rest of their lives. The last dolphin that was just wrestled and put in a net was really struggling, thrashing about, really putting up a fight to get away from the hunters. They do not drag the dolphins by their tails. They pull the dolphin parallel to the side of the skiff and trap them with a net, and then drive the skiff under the tarps. It's now almost 7:30 in the morning. This process started around 6:30. So not only have the dolphins had to endure being wrestled for a whole hour, they've been trapped in the cove with no food or water overnight. The captivity industry is a global problem. There are captive facilities all over Europe and the US, as well as in other various places across the world. It's not just Japan that supports what happens here. If you go to a marine park anywhere, not just Japan, you are supporting what happens. You can hear a lot of shouting under the tarps. It looks like they're starting to prepare these skiffs in the top left of your screen to attach slings to. So as I mentioned, there are a few juveniles in this pod. We'll keep a close eye and see what happens to those. So you can also see the dolphins that are still outside of that innermost net. It's unclear what's going to happen to those dolphins at the moment. And we're just waiting to see what happens next. It looks like they are preparing slings and the skiffs to transport captive dolphins out of the bay. We'll let you know as soon as we see anything. If you're just joining us, this is Dolphin Project. We're live from the Cove in Taiji as a pod of bottlenose dolphins is undergoing the captive selection process. Once these dolphins are in their new environments, they live extremely stressful lives and very unnatural for them. Just last week we saw one of the trainers kneeing a dolphin in the head as they transported it to another pen. This dolphin appeared to be really struggling, flailing about in its sling, and in order to try and stop it, the trainer kneed it in the head. These trainers claim to love and care for these dolphins, but they clearly show them no respect. So this skiff that's just heading under the tarps now has got a couple of bars across the boat which they attach slings to. There's a lot of shouting and commotion coming from under the tarps. So they're attaching slings to the skiffs at the moment. It's unclear how many dolphins they've taken captive as of yet, but as they start to leave the cove, we will be able to get a count on those. So this morning we saw 5 banger boats leave the harbour to hunt for more dolphins. And we're continuing to keep an eye on their activity. So the first skiff is now leaving the cove. And there are 4 bottlenose dolphins attached to this skiff. These dolphins have just been ripped away from their families, never to see them again. I'm just trying to get them over that net. So those dolphins won't live like real dolphins anymore. They'll instead become puppets for human entertainment. So far 4 bottlenose dolphins have been stolen from their homes in the ocean for a life in captivity. There are still dolphins swimming down between the nets. It's unclear what will happen to them at the moment. So we often get asked why we can't intervene and why we can't cut the nets and free the dolphins, and that's just because we'd be arrested and deported, and there'd be no one here to document what happens to these dolphins and expose it to the world. It's really important that we stay here and spread awareness about how the captive trade starts. Dolphin Project are here on the ground 6 months of the year throughout the whole season, which starts on September the 1st. If you're unfamiliar with what happens here, hunters leave the harbour in their boats, which we call banger boats, which have poles that run alongside of them. So when they find a pod, they lower these poles into the water, and at the end of the poles they have like a bell shape. So when they bang on the top end of the pole underwater, it creates a wall of sound. The boats all line up in order to create this wall of sound, which distresses the dolphins. Dolphins are extremely sensitive to sound. It's their primary sense. It's like sight is to us. And so this disorientates the dolphins and confuses them, and they try and swim away from this noise. But unfortunately, the hunters just continue to chase them, and they drive them towards the coast, into this cove, where they then net them across. And the dolphins, either, like these bottlenose dolphins today, go through the captive selection, or they are slaughtered for their meat. Dolphin meat is sold in local supermarkets and restaurants, but it isn't very popular among the Japanese anymore. It's extremely high in mercury and can cause mercury poisoning, which is really detrimental to health. It can cause all sorts of medical problems. So if you're just joining us, we're live from the cove as a pod of bottlenose dolphins undergoes captive selection. So far, 4 dolphins have been taken. So we can hear another skiff. This has potentially got more captives on it. So this skiff also has 4 captives on it. So far 8 dolphins have been taken. This pod seems to be larger than we originally expected. As there are still a number of dolphins swimming down in the cove. This pod have lost 8 of their family members so far. Please bear with me just a moment. Just gonna go and check something. Hi everyone. The 8 dolphins that have been taken captive so far have been taken to the harbour pens. And there is no sign of the banger boats just yet. Can't really hear much commotion under the tarps at the moment. But we'll just hang on to see if any more skiffs leave with captive dolphins. Thank you for bearing with us, everyone. If you're just joining us, this is Dolphin Project. We're live as a pod of bottlenose dolphins is being housed in the cove. So far, 8 of them have been stolen for a life in captivity. So it's possible that they're waiting for these skiffs to return to the cove before taking more dolphins. You can see the rest of the pod swimming quite frantically. They're splashing quite a lot. They've just lost 8 family members. We really appreciate all of your support. Please do share this live stream. We're live on both Facebook and Twitter at the moment. So share on Facebook and retweet on Twitter. It's really important that we get the word out. If you're interested in volunteering as a cove monitor out here in Taiji, you can visit our website at dolphin.fyi and fill out the application form. So we can still hear people on the beach under the tarps. So between these two nets, there are 3 bottlenose dolphins, and we're unsure how many are down in between the first net and the beach at the moment. We'll have to review our footage to get a count on that. All we know is that 8 captive dolphins have been taken. So if you didn't see our live stream yesterday, on returning to Taiji in the afternoon, just to do a drive-through as we do every day, we noticed that there were a pod of bottlenose dolphins netted in the cove. The hunters very rarely go out in the middle of the day to search for dolphins, so it's possible that they received a tip-off, but we can't be certain. But these dolphins were held overnight. They hired security guards to stand at the beach to make sure that nothing happened to the dolphins. There's a sign actually on one of the nets that claims that the dolphins in the cove belong to the Fisheries Union. But these dolphins were wild animals. Another diver is in the water again, so it's possible they're gonna be taking more dolphins, but it's unclear at the moment. So they are beginning to capture more dolphins. There's one parallel to this skiff right now. This dolphin is really thrashing against the side of the skiff, trying to escape. The hunters have returned with more slings. So it looks like they are planning to take more dolphins. So it looks as if the hunters are now pulling up this inner net. There are still dolphins. There's 3 dolphins between these 2 nets that they could be trying to push towards the beach. It looks like they're pulling the nets back. So they are pulling both of these nets back, potentially meaning that the process is over. This isn't clear at the moment though. So it looks like they're actually just making it easier for skiffs to leave. They had a little bit of trouble getting the slings over the nets as the last 2 skiffs left. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. If you've just started watching, this is Dolphin Project. We're live from the Cove in Taiji as a pod of bottlenose dolphins are being held. So far, 8 of them have been taken captive. Actually looks like they're pushing these dolphins out. And we can see at least one juvenile among the pod that they're driving out. There's still one more net that is preventing them from going out to sea. It's very unclear what the hunters are doing right now, but we'll try and make sense of it and let you know. So the hunters are pulling up these nets as well. So the majority of the remaining pod are out by that outer net. You can see them just through those branches there. There were 3 dolphins that were between the nets, but I haven't seen them for a little while. We'll try and spot them. So divers are entering the water. hunters are still capturing these dolphins. You can see the divers in the water just pouncing on them. You can see them by that net. So these three bottlenose that were between the nets, one of them has been taken under the tarps. The divers are still in the water, not sure if they're going to try and tackle the other two as well. It's just devastating to know that the rest of the pod are just witnessing their family be completely manhandled and harassed. So they just pushed one of the dolphins over the nets to rejoin it with the rest of the pod. And they've just done the same with the last dolphin, pushed it over those nets. Those two dolphins clearly weren't pretty enough for the captivity industry. We really appreciate all of your support. We're currently live on Facebook and Twitter. Please share on Facebook and retweet this live stream on Twitter. So they don't usually slaughter bottlenose dolphins in Taiji. Their meat isn't particularly desirable here. It's been a long time since they intentionally slaughtered bottlenose dolphins. They only take them for captivity. The last skiffs just arrived back in the cove from taking 4 of the captives to the harbour pens. We'll see if any more captives are taken. So they're still trapped in the cove at the moment, this net at the mouth of the cove is ensuring that they don't get away just yet. Lots of shouting and commotion under the tarps again. But it does look like this process is wrapping up as they are beginning to remove all of the other nets. So we still haven't seen any activity from the 5 banger boats that left the harbour this morning to search for more dolphins. We'll keep monitoring the horizon though to see if we can see them. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Please help us spread the word that dolphins do not belong in captivity by sharing this live stream and by sharing any of our posts on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Dolphins in the wild never stop moving, even when they're sleeping. They actually sleep with half of their brain active at a time. So they're constantly moving. But in captivity we see them again and again just logging at the surface of their pens or of their tanks. So there's a skiff that's just preparing to leave. Can't yet see if there are any slings attached. There's one sling on this boat, so one bottlenose dolphin, the 9th one being taken away from its family. being driven past its family members for the last time. This is the last time they'll see them. This pod has been absolutely torn apart today. And there's another dolphin on this boat as well. So this is the 10th captive that they have taken today. There are still a couple of skiffs left in the cove. The tarps are being pulled back now. And the final two skiffs are leaving. I'm just going to move location to see if we can get a view of them driving the remainder of the dolphins out to sea. Just bear with me. So the dolphins are just inside this net, but the skiffs appear to be leaving the dolphins in the cove. And they seem to be heading back to the harbour. It's possible that they're going to get banger boats that they'll use to drive the dolphins back out to sea. We'll hang on for a little bit longer just to double check. So in total, 10 bottlenose dolphins have been stolen for life in captivity so far. This is the only net that is still strewn across the cove, but the remainder of the dolphins are within that net. So there are no hunters in the cove at the moment. We're just going to hold on to see if they come back for the remaining dolphins. The wind's really picking up here, and we can see lots of white water out towards the horizon, so the waves do look pretty choppy. Hopefully those banger boats that left the harbour this morning to hunt for dolphins are unsuccessful and return pretty soon. It is now 20 to 9 in the morning. dolphins just swimming inside of the net. Missing 10 of their family members. I'm just going to leave the live stream running for just a moment. I'll be back in just a minute. There is a skiff making its way back over to the cove. But there's no sign of anyone else just yet. We'll keep you updated. We can see that these dolphins have been tagged. The juveniles, however, haven't. And in fact, not all of them have been tagged. There's only a couple of them. So you might be able to hear the boats coming back now. They tag the dolphins so that if they see them again in the wild on a hunt, they don't drive them back in, or they know that they don't want to select that particular dolphin for a life in captivity. So skiffs are returning. You'll see them come by in just a minute. So 2 skiffs are just arriving in the cove right now. Possible that they're just going to pick up equipment, but I'll make my way round back to the previous location and see if we can see what they're up to. So they've gone straight down to the beach. Dolphins are still trapped in the cove. We'll just hold on to see what happens. It's possible that they're just going to pick up equipment, but I'll make my way round back to the previous location and see if we can see what they're up to. So they've gone straight down to the beach. Dolphins are still trapped in the cove. We'll just hold on to see what happens.